going to have a conversation now between the Parramatta Eels fan and the Penrith Panthers fan, but we'll move on quickly to a discussion between two of the nations, between two of the brains of Western Sydney. Christopher Brown is the Honorary Chair of regional not-for-profit think tank, the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, who we recently hosted out here in Penrith. I said to them, look, guys, you talk about Western Sydney, you focus a lot on Parramatta, how about you come out to Penrith? And they said, well, how about you buy us lunch?
Maybe a bit.
So I did, and we hosted them at the Log Cabin, and that was a great event. So for 20 years, Christopher has led two of the nation's most powerful industry peak bodies, formerly with the Infrastructure Partnerships Australia and Tourism and Transport Forum, comprising CEOs from Australia's public and private sectors. He's helped build a national constituency in favour of sustainable development of aviation, transport, tourism and infrastructure. Stuart needs no further introduction, and I'll leave the two to go at it in the best possible
Well,
way.
Christopher Brown, welcome to Penrith.
Thank you, mate.
This
It's
is
always
the-
good to be in the riff.
This is the final session of the day.
Yeah, we're going to rev them up, don't we? We're going to keep
I
them
know
awake.
that you've been doing the Western Sydney thing for a long, long time. You were right at the forefront of advocating for the airport. We're now right on the doorstep of a metro rail being open, an airport being open. We've seen billions of dollars of infrastructure. There's a lot that has happened, but let's not dwell on what's already taken place. Let's stay pretty focused on what still needs to happen, and that's been the focal point for today. Yep. So you cross over advocacy, industry, a little bit of politics, just so the people in the room get a good sense of who you are. Why don't you give us a really short intro on what the leadership dialogue is, and then I'm going to pull together some of the threads of the day, and then give, through the course of this conversation, we're going to set some challenges around what has to happen next.
Sweet. Firstly, how's his audition gone to be a talkback host? Have you rated him pretty high?
Yeah.
The next step. Thanks, mate. Look, the dialogue is what we're a think tank for Western Sydney. There's business chambers, there's community groups, all sorts of stuff. We try to bring everything together. Not a business to government or government to government, but a bit of community education, business and leadership. Basically, a region that, and it's hard to imagine, if you're new to this game, you think, oh, the West has always been the hottest thing in Sydney. Well, it hasn't. It wasn't. And through efforts of a lot of people, including plenty in this room, including this fella significantly as well, it's become now a place where elections are decided in New South Wales and Australia. It's a place that is the third biggest economy in Australia. It's the place that's a growth on both of those. It's a place that's home to, a quarter of all migrants coming to Australia. It's a place that's driving an economy, and it's a place that is at scale now, at global scale. The city-shaping experiment of Greater Western Sydney is a thing globally. And we're taking a group back to East London next month. We go and learn from the POMs about East London being an equivalent destination, wrong side of the tracks, Western Sydney, East London. And we went there 5 years ago and learned all we could. One of the things we learnt was that there's some things we're better at. They are, and they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. We're 10 years into this, 15 years maybe into this bold experiment. So, and with that, it's not one homogenous region, so we've got to try and cover the Penrith to Homebush. We think of Western Sydney as Olympic Park to Katoomba, Hawkesbury to the Highlands. It's a big space, anchored by places like Penrith. And frankly, as you and I have discussed, I think Penrith needs this sort of vision. Good luck to you and Foxy and others who in council are doing this, exactly what we need. Because Penrith probably, all the efforts we've all done, others have kicked on a little more, taken a bigger dividend out so far. Parramatta, obviously. I think Liverpool, inspired by that, has sort of anchored that. So we all need Penrith standing up, speaking out, and because it's the sort of Western anchor of that, and where we can help that and what we can do in the new projects. Right, there's been plenty. There's a lot more though. Never give up, never stop, never assume we've got enough. We've had 200 years to getting bugger all. We've had 10 years of getting something. We're still 190 years behind just since white fellas have been here. So we've got a lot more to do.
All right, let's unpack a few more of those things. Airport's on the way, rail lines underway, road infrastructure is going to connect those types of things. Are we still talking, we're here today talking about the visitor economy, so we're primarily talking about creating jobs. Is jobs still a strong enough part of the domestic narrative?
No. We had 5 years ago, it was about jobs for the West and homes. It's flipped again now, and it's now homes, and the argument is not leave jobs behind. We can't have Western Sydney just as a dormitory to fill the factories and office blocks of the east. Simply building a better train line to get you to work in the city is not an outcome we need.
And just to dwell on that a little bit, how important is the visitor economy in creating those jobs here?
Well, amenity. Amenity matters more to Western Sydney than other parts. They've got natural amenity. We haven't naturally had the amenity, and that's from good lighting to a nice park to great coffee to somewhere to go out at night. Amenity means a lot of things to different people. Mike Rodriguez would have given you a good spiel about the nighttime economy being part of that. But because we want to maintain the millennial generation, I certainly am not one of them. Stewie's closer to it than I am, but I've got kids that are, and it matters more. If we're going to attract and retain talent, and that's the future of Western Sydney. We've got all the fancy infrastructure in the world. Our strongest suit is the people who live here, the people we'll attract here, and the people we can keep here. And all the other things are important, but if you can't get a good coffee, if there's a good job around the corner, if your kids don't have access to the school they want, we're going to lose that talent, and no amount of shiny airports and factories or even national parks is going to hold them if community doesn't. So that concept of visitor economy, it used to be just tourism. Now it's providing to government something more. It's part of the amenity piece. It's arts and sport and environment and amenity all rolling into one, and tourism gets to own it and package it up, called the visitor economy, and it's been a good evolution of tourism in that way to give politicians a better understanding. Some have an innate understanding, him, my old man, but most of them don't. So to get that innate understanding, the visitor economy is good, and it's all those good bits rolled into one, and we've got to keep plugging it, but it's every day you wake up starting again.
So getting into some nitty gritty, one of the big themes to come out of today was, I think I heard the word collaboration 100 times. I probably said it myself 25 times. It's a real key theme. You're a guy who's grown up in Western Sydney. You've seen governments come and go, political parties come and go, local members come and go. And over time, the parochialism of Western Sydney...
Maybe some local members come back some stage too, I hope. But...
over time, I'm just the moderator today. Over time, the parochialism has waned a little bit as they've started to see the benefits of being more collaborative. But as a guy who's been bringing people together across Western Sydney, how important is that collaboration piece, and what are some of the lessons you've learned that you can impart on this crowd?
I spoke in Parramatta last night. Andrew Charlton, who's one of the brightest new members of federal member for Parramatta, and probably a future Treasurer, Prime Minister, and an asset there. And I spoke about the need for Parramatta to be a better big brother. The rest of Western Sydney whinges, Parramatta gets everything, Parramatta this, Parramatta that. I get that. Without a strong Parramatta, there's no strong Penrith, Blacktown, Liverpool, Campbelltown, anything. We have to have that. That's the hub. We need the spokes. We need the hub not to be the Sydney city anymore. We need to move the hub to Parramatta and then really develop the spokes. So Parra's got to be a better big brother. It's got to help the other cities going forward with it. In a way, I can map Sydney. I mean, Fairfield and Blacktown have spent the past 10 years, frankly, going, nick off, we don't need you, no one cares about it. Liverpool said, shit, I want to be like Parramatta, and I want to beat Penrith. Liverpool's ambition was to jump ahead of Penrith as number 2 and get in behind, and I've been admission that they certainly raised their spectre. Blacktown sat and whinged about no one likes us, so we're not going to engage with the world, the hidden empire. Fairfield's now just sitting lobbing bombs at people. So one foot is collaboration, that's just full-on frontal attack, Frank Carboni. So the various parts, and it's hard to read with Penrith. It's said it was the natural number 2. Take the footy team away, take Stewie away. I mean, there's been some natural, icons for brand Penrith. But I think the time is right to do it again. So does collaboration mean, forget the result at the footy, but how does Penrith and Parramatta twin to go forward on stuff? How do you, in a way, as soon as the airport was announced, that a great anchor of Western Sydney went below the M4. Suddenly, what used to be 15 years ago was all about growth sectors in the Hawkesbury, Blacktown, north of Penrith. That momentum shifted significantly with two issues: the Brisbane floods, and that changed the way legislators think about resilience right across everything, and Western Sydney Airport being down where it was. It just suddenly the southwest took over from the northwest. So Blacktown, Penrith, Hawkesbury, even the hills have a job to get the momentum back north of the M4. Parramatta has its own momentum, unstoppable. Cumberland, Fairfield always struggle, they're little players. But Camden, Campbelltown, Liverpool, Bankstown, all sort of working as the great southwest. So I think that's one of the existential challenges for government and private sector. How to address the PMF. I'm sure the flooding came up today because in some ways it's an easy excuse for government to say, well, if we say it all can't be built, we don't have to build any infrastructure. We can just say there's lots of land in the southwest and forget about it, and that has to be challenged appropriately. So anything like this we can collaborate, just the effort of coming in the room today, everybody goes away. What's one thing you can go and do? There's people like Rich and Stu and I have got to go and actually knock on the door, but you're the content providers, you're the people in whose name we speak, you're the people who get to vote, you're the people who get to go to fundraisers, you're the people who get to write letters to the editor and knock on doors, and you have to do it, and there's a goodwill. So how does Penrith collaborate? It joins with other cities. It joins...
So a good way that we've been talking about today is thinking about this through the lens of business. So how do businesses partner up? How do they package offerings to tour operators? How do they work more closely with venue operators, whether it's Whitewater and Cirque, stadium operators, zoos? We've had ATEC in place. So there's a strong foundation here. I want to
It's
ask...
not likely adventure tourism piece. I mean, you're the gateway to the mountains. That's a really important part, the collaboration west of here. Yep. And not just the Blue Mountains, Western New South Wales. They see that airport as their airport as well. How does Penrith harness the whole outer west to be the capital of that? The Hawkesbury, the Blue Mountains, Penrith, Dubbo, Lismore, Lithgow, etc. There really is a drive there that I think Penrith has that role to be that piece.
If there was a phrase that has probably come to define the new state government in the first 12 months, it's up, not out.
I don't know where you're going. I have to wait to see which one that was going to be.
What does that mean? What does that mean for this community?
Look, up, not out is quite frankly, it's a cute little... I mean, in its essence, it's not a dumb idea. Governments realise what business sector has already known for a while. It's freaking expensive to build stuff out in the outer parkland, Western Parkland City, because you've got to pay for the headworks, the road to the front door, the power, the water, the communications, etc. It's really expensive. They say, in simple terms, we've got free land. It's got airspace above a train station. It's money for jam for a government. How do we do that? I'm delighted that the last government went, some say, too far straight to the outer west because it was easy and it was cow paddocks and green fields. Thank Christ they did, because they planted some momentum that can't stop. The government has pulled back a bit, but it can't stop a metro line coming. The hope of the side, the airport, on time, under budget, or before time, under budget. I think it'll surprise them. I guess it'll probably open before we think it will. It's going really well. And I, with PM yesterday and at the opening of the other bit of infrastructure at Moorebank, and begged him to please take the Premier with him. We need a federal and state government realising once every 100 years you get an airport. Once every 100 years.
Do you think the risk of momentum being lost is real?
Yep. The momentum has been lost. We've got to regain the momentum. It was probably unsustainable momentum, and I'd rather have that than always give me more ambition than not enough. I can manage that. We need to re-spark the momentum. We need to find another reason, because the crushing sound of build homes in apartments in the central river city, the inner city, is a strong one. It resonates with bureaucrats, etc. But
we had a panellist earlier today, you weren't in the room, Will Schrump from Estina, one of our hotel operators. He spoke about the need for mixed-use developments, having more people in CBD locations as being a driving force for additional visitor economy and tourism efforts. And it makes sense, right? If you're a hospitality operator and you've got more customers closer to your front door, if you're investing in hotels, whether it's visiting family and relatives, that means more people living here. If it's leisure, more experiences drive that. How do you see places like Liverpool, like Penrith, like Camden, sort of fitting into the mix at the moment when it comes to those economic drivers like housing, like infrastructure?
Again, we're the solution. That visitor economy amenity piece plays to tourism's hands. The coffee shop that serves the tourists also serves the locals. So how do you get that dual use? But I mean, I think there's also a challenge to this room. There's an airport going to open by latest Boxing Day 2026. Hopefully it's a bit before it if we have less days like today and they can keep building. But here's a challenge. That you're going to touch down at an airport probably at 6 o'clock in the morning because it's all dependent on when you fly anywhere else. If you're going to your hotel, whether it's in Penrith or in Pitt Street, you're not getting to that room till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, best fit. How do we amuse those people? There's something driven to the doorstep of Western Sydney. Let's own them. Start with owning them on the day they arrive. How do we innovate? How do you guys as content creators, as providers, think about putting an experience together? How do we capture them while they're in our backyard? Now, eventually we'll build to the others who want to bring to our backyard. I wrote a stinging letter to a guy at the Herald the other day. I don't know if you saw it during the tour, when Tay-Tay was in town. And a shitty article from a guy from Western Sydney saying, how stupid is she? She went to the wrong zoo twice. You obnoxious piece of whatever. Firstly, she the dumb blonde, that even the second time, she's still going the wrong direction? How about she chose that this was the best zoo to go to? How about she decided that she brought the boyfriend back? But we're up against that prejudice every time. So how do we overcome it? We can whinge about it and send shitty letters. I can stand up here and bag them.
Or we can just go and get Tay-Tay.
Or we can go and get Tay-Tay. We can go and provide a great product. We can have ambition. We can all in this room saying, what is Penrith Lakes going to be? Because it can't just be what it is. How does Penrith become, as it's become this venture tourism space, how does it own the Blue Mountain story? How is it the gateway to the mountains? There are only so many people can be in the mountains, stay on the mountain. This is like the ski resort where you go up to ski. You've got to, how does Penrith do that? How does it open up the Hawkesbury as a food bowl tourism, a paddock to plate to paddock approach? How does it be the hub that services the airport? There's a lot of stuff that governments have done to provide that infrastructure. I think to some extent it's on us, particularly in business, to start stepping in, innovating, get the support from Mike, from Destination, from Business Event Sydney. There's lots of parts of government that will lend a hand, but I think it's that Westie way to go and catch and kill our own. They haven't done much for us for 200 years. We've got used to doing it on our own. And I think that spark has to keep going and take that challenge. There's a new international airport being delivered on the front door. No one has any plan for what it means once they open it. How about we write the plan? How about we demand government come with us to make not just a plan for economic development of the region, visitor economy at its core, but not exclusively.
So for you, someone who's been engaged in advocacy for Western Sydney across the leadership dialogue, what are you now seeing as the priorities? What are the things that are dominating the conversations?
One,
that you think
it can't be a Western Sydney airport if Western Sydney can't get to it. Where are our rapid buses? Penrith, Campbelltown and Liverpool were promised. Where are they? Now, that's a state responsibility, not a federal one. Stuart will agree now, because you say it's feds.
I'm asking you what the priorities are, Chris.
The feds. So one, let's all demand, get those buses we were promised. Eventually, they won't start being electric or on busways. They eventually will. We've got to get them. Two, you can't have a 24-hour airport with an 8-hour metro that goes drop shit St Mary's or drop shit Bringelly. There's a federal election coming. Albo wants to win. It's more likely to go south from here than north the first stage, but you've got to get a federal government commitment to make it a real metro network, not a metro shuttle line. So that's the next most important thing.
So I just want to unpack that. So we had Peter Regan here earlier in the day, and
good man.
Peter was talking about the longer term options, and they've started business cases on going north to Schofields and Tallawong and south. Where do you think it should go next?
I think it should go both ways, but I think the most chance you get is money from the federal government, and I think Albo will pay to take it to Campbelltown.
Yeah.
I imagine that's the thing that'll be most like, we've got to get minimum extended the one stop to Bringelly and Leppington. I think the rail unions will mean it won't go metro to Glenfield, will go old rail in the other way. But a commitment from federal government, state government to take it somewhere. It can't just sit there. And a commitment for an economic strategy. A Premier and a Prime Minister signing off on, okay, the airport's opening, what's next? What does that mean? We need a dedicated economic development strategy for this region.
Is that using old language, City Deal 2.0?
Yeah,
or is it something
they
new?
Can stick
Like,
their brand names up where the sun don't shine.
No, it's the same principle.
Yeah, it means that give me a coordinator general. Give someone to crack heads together. I think Jennifer Westcott said we're copying everything at the Aerotropolis, but give us someone that can actually promise by when that road will be built to there, that train lines to there. Everybody needs certainty. I know it's a 50-year plan for the Aerotropolis, but we don't have to wait till year 45 to see the first development. You know, there's a frustration.
You mentioned East London earlier. We spoke a lot about Schiphol in the Netherlands as being a good example of a second airport that came into a market. What other locations are you looking at? We had Jake from Sydney Zoo talk about Orlando as being an engineered solution, bringing in new experiences, new assets that compounded into new experiences and new assets, and that drove demand. For a person who's taken people overseas, what are some of the international markets we should be looking at?
In East London, you're seeing Stansted and Luton and even the airport city, so smaller airports dragging a different clientele and getting behind networks. So I think that's the equivalent. We're going to get a bigger airport eventually, but it opens small. It's a small start. So I'd say if we want to call it Western Sydney Airport, let's make it Western Sydney's airport, while we campaigned very hard for the train line to open up originally. So what do we do to drive that whole economy? Smart jobs. I think the federal government promises 200,000 jobs in the Aerotropolis. I wonder if anyone's done a count lately. Apart from the builders, I don't know that they'll be lagging behind on that. So that model, something that you mentioned, Orlando is a really good model, but I think looking at how East London's done it and localising it, not everyone has to go to Heathrow. The big players still will, and the challenge will be airports are run by airlines really, not the guy who cleans the runway, but the guy who lands on it, or the person who lands on it is really important. So are we banging on Qantas and Jetstar and Virgin's door? Are we doing everything we can do to ensure foreign carriers? I mean, frankly, the abomination of the decision around Qantas and Qatar, which is a piece of appalling public policy. Surely the solution for Albo is, okay, Qatar, fill your boot. You can land at Badgerys as often as you like, as many flights as you like. You get Badgerys, you don't get Sydney Airport. We need to be banging the door about that. We should say Western Sydney says, we want Qatar flying here. The only way you move Qantas is with competition. The only way you'll get a change. So that ought to be an elegant solution for one thing that suits us. And, by the way, Open Skies Airport. We've stupidly been designated just like Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, when we should be like Darwin to start off with for the first 20 years. Anyone who wants to fly to Badgerys Creek, knock yourself out. Sorry, Qantas, you don't get to decide, you don't get the veto. Anyone who wants to come, that's an Open Skies Airport. It's our startup airport. It deserves a startup regulation. They've squibbed it on that. That won't be how it starts after year one. We have a chance to try and change that.
Well, I was going to ask you what we need to do, but we've currently got Open Skies Airport, Rapid Bus Transit, Coordinator General. So at Penrith Lakes, we've got a good list. We're going to wrap things up. It's been
horse tracks. We got there?
We haven't touched on horse tracks, but I think we'll leave that out. We'll leave that for higher parties to try and deal with.
If we don't address the flooding thing, everything you're talking about here is, for large parts of this, is not doable. So don't underestimate the fight over this thing called PMF, the probable maximum flood rating. We've taken what was 1 in 100 year and made it 1 in 100,000 year as the new level. That's a massive impact. I'm pretty sure Rosehill Racecourse is under the PMF, as would be the brick pit, as would be everything. So it's a challenge for government, but we're going to have to address that, or the rest of it is not going to matter.
So I think that's a nice little key point to be aware of, that we've spoken, whether it's for night economy, the regulatory settings of government have a capacity to slow down or put at risk the ability for capital to be deployed, for the economy to thrive as well as it could in its natural form. The way in which we think about flood planning levels could have a profound impact on the way we deliver tourism infrastructure and therefore tourism experiences.
Beware of government saying there's a lot of land in the southwest. I'll just totally cauterise northwest Sydney, and that's the danger, the clear and present danger. That corner from, the hills to Katoomba, that whole wedge just said that's too hard. That's under floodplain. We're going south of the M4. That's a genuine threat.
All right. So beyond flooding and some of the things that you've spoken about, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to ask you two things. What's the thing you're most concerned about for the future
Panthers
of Western
playing
Sydney?
out of Paris Stadium for 2 years. I mean,
That's
but you can't beat us at home. That'll be really embarrassing. So,
and then secondly, what's the thing you're most optimistic about?
look, I'm most concerned about that regaining momentum in the northwest. I think we've allowed it to get too hard, and it's not too hard. That Penrith Lakes, we built Sydney out of that Penrith Lake with it filled. We've got to help it rebuild the west, the other way around. So life cycle stuff, and that requires some champions from this part of town. We really need. The voices have switched to southwest. They're louder voices now northwest, and frankly, all the west together, we are bifurcating. Let's be honest. There's going to be two wests. There's no longer a one. There's probably three: in a west, Parramatta, a southwest, and a northwest, and that's the challenge. The thing I'm most excited by is simply the sheer quality of human beings. When I grew up, my school at North Parramatta, 150 kids in year 10, 60 kids year 11, 10 of them went to uni, and they all went somewhere east of Macquarie. Now that doesn't happen anymore because it doesn't have to, because of the universities, WSU and all the ones that have followed. How do we capture and retain talent? The battle in the 21st, 22nd century is all about talent. Great cities, the world's run by 100 great cities. You've got to move, you're not in one, move to it. And this has to be the anchor. We are part of Sydney, but we're a special part of Sydney. That all comes from keeping our talent, enabling the talent, educating them, giving them job prospects, somewhere affordable to live, and importantly, remind people that key essential workers are marvellous, and they're coppers and teachers and nurses, but so too are artists, so too are content and cultural promoters and creators. Half-decent coppers close to 100 grand a year. If you're a working artist making more than 25 grand a year, you're a genius. So great cities need creative people as well. They are essential key workers. We need to try and keep that creative class in Western Sydney, not ever having to run to a squat in Enmore to practice their art, but to make their art here. That plays to all of us. A creative city is an exciting city, it's a dynamic city, it's a growing city.
Always a rich conversation with you, Christopher Brown. A nice way to finish off. If up, not out is a political mantra, then I think one thing that we've learnt today is that outer Western Sydney, regardless of whoever's governing, is on the way up, from airports to rail lines to where we live to the tourism offering. It's been great to have you in the room. And Richard, I'm going to hand over to you, and I hope everyone's found the conversation that we've had with a multiplicity of stakeholders to be insightful and useful for how they make their plans for their own businesses. And if there was one message I was going to take away from Chris Brown's firepower half hour, it's been make sure you use your own voice if you want people to pay attention.
Yes, here we go. Well, thank you, Chris Brown and Stuart Ayres. He played every second of the game. There was no bench to... Penrith and Para, I'm going to be very quick on this.
Definitely
Penrith and Para deal.
Definitely Penrith.
Collaboration
Collaboration
comes with it. Radio show, the Stew and Brownie, it's called No Holds Barred, I think. Will that get up? We talked today, collaboration, lots of ticks. Infrastructure, investment and experience. Things we can do now are work on the quality of the experiences that we offer, promote them better and keep them high level so people start talking about us. It's been rich.